Welcome back to CHGO Bears After Dark, presented by DraftKings. Make sure you use the code CHGO when you sign up. It's Greg Braggs here alongside Corey Wooten. As always, got a little mini bye week, so we're going to kind of change it up from, the next day reaction of our games that we normally are talking about, since we're a few days removed from the Bears win over the Carolina Panthers and still a week away from Bears Lions on the road without knowing who our quarterback is. I figured we'd try to break down exactly where this team is at. It's not the exact halfway point of the season, but I figured we'd wait to hand out some midway grades here during this mini bye. So that's what we're going to do tonight. How we doing, Corey?
I'm doing good, my man. It's always good after a win, regardless of who the opponent was. It's always good to get a dub in the win column. So it was good from that aspect of things. Still a lot to work on. I'll tell you that.
Yeah, I mean, if they play the way they did against Carolina, I think they lose to almost every team in the league but Carolina. So it'll be interesting to see if Justin can come back this Sunday. We put out a video of him earlier at practice. I mean, just like last practice, it seemed like he might be ready to go, but we're just going to have to wait and see. Tall order on the road. I'll tell you this much, Corey, for the Panthers game before we get into our grades. We were joined by Brian Urlacher, and this guy,
I saw that.
This guy, me and him, we butted heads like during the show.
I saw some of it. Yeah.
During the show and after. He's hating on my boy Devin Hester. And if there's one line I draw in the sand, it's Devin Hester, who I would guard with I would take a bullet for that guy.
So I saw a little clip about that when you were making a comparison. Talk about that real quick.
Yeah, because Urlacher's argument was like, hey, Zach Thomas and these other guys, they didn't get in right away. It took them how many years to get in? They played every snap, and Devin Hester didn't play as many snaps as Zach Thomas. And I said, well, Mariano Rivera didn't have as many innings pitched as, Greg Maddux, but he still was the best closer of all time, so they put him in the Hall of Fame. And everybody was like, oh, this is a stupid comparison. I think it's a great one. What do you say, Corey? Because you blocked for one, Devin Hester.
Yeah, I think that's a tough comparison, but I do think he deserves a spot in the Hall of Fame for sure. And I get where Urlacher's coming from, right? Because there's a lot of talented position players that deserve to get in and have it. Like, think about it. T.O. was a second ballot Hall of Fame. That's a travesty. That really is. And the people say the off the field issues. What about somebody like LT? Talk about off the field issues, all the stuff he was doing back in the day. Imagine if there was social media when he played. Oh boy, he'd be in trouble. But yeah, I think I agree from that standpoint. There's a lot of very talented guys that should have been first ballot or second ballots that it took them a long while to get in. So I do think Devin Hester is one of those once in a lifetime type players, right? That really changed the game. And the game is so different now. So I don't think we'll ever see somebody. I think the closest comparison has been Cordell Patterson, right? And that's kick returning abilities, not as much in the punt return game, but what he's been able to do. So Devin Hester completely changed the game. So I think, he deserves to be in there. It's just a matter of when at this point. But literally playing with the guy, blocking for him on punt return, anytime he touched the ball, he could take it to the crib. And I don't think there's ever been a player like that when he gets the ball in his hand, it's like he could score every time. So it was a lot of fun.
Special is an understatement, but to me, whatever, it is what it is. I'm gonna always campaign for my guy Devin. First ballot would have been really nice.
Were you scared of Urlacher? Were you a little scared?
No, I ain't scared of Urlacher.
Oh, your voice got really high.
Am I scared of anybody, Corey? I'll talk shit with the best of them. So yeah, even after
Carm.
I'm not scared of Carm.
Boy,
calm down,
down with that tennis racket, boy.
You calm down over there. No, even after the show, I got back. I jumped right back into it with him. I wasn't going to let him off the hook. But it was a great guest, and it was an honor to talk with, Hall of Fame linebacker, and surreal to talk with guys like him and you, honestly, not to blow smoke up your ass, because I'm not doing that, but it's the truth, as the fanboy that once ran around Bourbonnais, asking for pictures and autographs from you guys, to be able to now talk to you guys on this kind of level is a lot of fun and a great thrill for me and something I don't take for granted. So that's it. That's the only compliment you're going to get this season from me.
Thank you. But real quick before we move on to the next topic, playing with Urlacher, unbelievable. I don't think having him and Briggs there when I played was unbelievable. Like the intelligence that they had. I can't tell you how many times they would call out the play before it would happen, right? Urlacher would be like, watch the boot. All of a sudden they run a boot. I run up to the next level. They get it out quick, right? Henry Melton, when he's playing 3 technique, watch the trap. All of a sudden they trap. They knew every situation that was going to happen. And I remember one time Lance Briggs were playing Detroit. And this is when Megatron is one of the best receivers in the league. He knew he was coming across the middle. He called it beforehand. He's like, I'm going to knock him. So literally he came in on a slant. Briggs was waiting there. Boom! Shoulders him right up under the chin. Megatron goes down. He's hurt.
I remember.
Oh, it was
what a moment.
Beautiful and so fun to play with those guys. Like that's why it's a little bit tough to watch sometimes with the defense. And I know it's a work in progress, but especially that 2012 defense that we had, it was so fun playing with those guys. We were flying around. We were having fun playing. Yeah, it was.
Well, and he talked a lot about, because I asked him about your stance on the I called it the Tampa 2, and he corrected me and said it's the Chicago 2.
Yeah.
And he kind of explained it the way you did about how it's able to really, accentuate what players do great if you have the right pieces in place. And you're kind of speaking to that too with Briggs, knowing what's coming and understanding this is where he's going to be. And that's where Briggs is going to be. And it's all about, tackling technique and just laying your guy out man to man there. And Brian said, just a lot of teams don't have the patience to be to stick with it. They panic and get out of it. And that's part of the reason why maybe you're seeing not as much of it, but maybe you should. So it was a lot of, go ahead.
Yeah, no. I was going to say with the Tampa 2, I think it comes down to a lot of coaching, right? I always talk about Rod Marinelli and my experience with him as a defensive line coordinator, the defensive coordinator and defensive line coach. He brought the best out of guys, and guys generally wanted to run through a brick wall for him. I've never seen so many guys ready to go and play for him, for Lovie Smith, the way that we did when I was there. It was unbelievable to see. And I think a guy like Rod Marinelli, he brought the best out of his guys. Look what he did with a guy like Henry Melton, a former running back that played defensive end his last year at Texas. Really got drafted off of his pro day because he ran like a 4.6 at 285 pounds. Lamar Houston was the big time recruit out of Texas at that point. So there's a lot of scouts there. They saw him move around. They saw how nimble he was. They ended up drafting him as a defensive end. First year really doesn't work out for him, doesn't play. And then they transition him to 3 technique. And then he flourishes there and literally just his growth. And it's unfortunate that he tore his ACL that contract year because, he was really on the rise to be one of the top 3 techniques in the league. His quickness was unreal. Like literally a running back playing 3 technique. It was
and that's where it's like, we talk a lot about, this team, if they just had a dominant 3 technique, they'd have a great defense. Well, obviously, I think any defense would love to have a dominant 3 technique. But when I remember the Tampa 2 is that, the Chicago 2 and you guys and Lovey back in the day, Tommy Harris, Tommy Harris. Okay. Tommy was a dominant 3 technique. And had he stayed healthy, he would have had an unbelievable career, but he didn't stay healthy. And the Bears were able to get guys like Tank Johnson and Henry Melton. And like you're talking about, they're not dominant players, but they played their role correctly. And you had Adewale Ogunleye and Alex Brown, because it's not just about the 3 technique. If you're getting that pressure on the edge, now you can have a guy like Hank Melton making plays on the inside. And so it's complementary football across the board. So would it be great to have Jalen Carter or whatever, a dominant 3 technique? Yes, but from what I saw of the Lovie Smith days in the Tampa 2, it didn't require the best 3 technique in the league for the defense to be effective.
Well, I'll tell you what it did at the 3 technique is quickness. And that's what I look at a guy like Henry Melton. When you look at him, right, if he played a traditional 4-3, not exactly getting off the ball all the time as a 3 technique, he would struggle in run defense, right? But all of a sudden, you know, you get him off the football, and penetration creates you know, it stops, you know, the opposing ball carrier. That's all it's about is penetration. So Tommy Harris, you know, even back to the Warren Sapp days when they did it in Tampa, it's all about the penetration. The penetration creates that. And I think that was evident, you know, in the times that this defense really runs well, is it doesn't have to be the necessarily most dominant, most disruptive three technique. And I think that's what Henry Melton did. That's what Tommy Harris did. So it was awesome to see.
Obviously, Warren Sapp then takes your defense to a Super Bowl level. So I'm not saying by any means that they shouldn't strive to have a dominant three technique. I'm just saying to have an effective defense, I've seen this defense not absolutely require the best of the best when it comes to the three techniques. You just need solid players across the board. So let's get into it. And Matt Eberflus's defense, we're giving out grades. You know, we'll try to buzz through some of these. I have kind of a 3-tier system, and we'll start from kind of most important topics and then kind of work our way into the, you know, kind of spacing out individual, you know, position groups if we can get to that point. So tier 1 is Matt Eberflus, Justin Fields, and Luke Getsy. Let's start with, you know, the buck always stops with the head coach. Let's start with Matt Eberflus. And Corey, I want you to give out your midway grade for head coach Matt Eberflus.
I'm gonna say, I'm gonna be nice here. I'm gonna say a C minus. I really want to give him a D, but I don't want to be too critical. But I just think he's really underperformed for what the expectations were this year. And we always talk about this, Braggs. They have a lot more talent on the team this year, but they're performing worse. So I think that's the mark of the head coach. You know what? I'm gonna give him a D plus. No, I'm gonna go back. Right, D plus. That's what I'm gonna say, a D plus, because I think the reason why everything is playing out the way it is definitely, you know, a mark of the head coach. So I just think he's underperformed. He has more talent. How are you playing worse at this point? Some of the decision making at times, it kind of makes you scratch your head. So I'm gonna give him a D plus on that. What about you?
Yeah, I'm with you. I went to a D. It should be an F, but the thing that I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt of when you talk about on the field is his secondary for a period of time. The entire secondary was out. That had to be very hard to tread water during that time. So that is the one excuse I will give him. The excuses I won't give him is how long it took for him to identify that they need to blitz more. Silly that they took him 5 weeks to get to that point. To me, the way he handled the Chase Claypool stuff to start the year, if we're going to talk about off the field, the way he handled the Alan Williams fiasco that week, to me, that isn't, because that all comes under the head coach. You know, a lot of what Matt Eberflus does is going to predicate what he's doing on defense. They have the number 1 rush defense in the NFL. That's why they're not a failing grade. They did have injuries sustained to the secondary. Another reason why I considered not giving him a failing grade. But at the end of the day, this is one of the worst teams in football. And to your point, they did add pieces to this roster. I heard at one point Ryan Poles say, you know, this team hasn't given up. I would tend to disagree with that when I look at the Kansas City Chiefs game and the way this team just laid down. I know they were completely outmatched that day, but I just didn't like the vibes coming from that team in that locker room that week. And I think they were kind of worn out from everything. So, you know, I understand it, but at the same time, you got to have a little backbone and you know, your team is a reflection of your head coach, and he wasn't showing great leadership at the time, and that trickled into the locker room. So like I said, then you talk about not identifying the blitz, not just sending 4. The other stuff on the other side of the ball, he doesn't just get an excuse from the offense. You know, to me, to not be doing the tush push 5 weeks into the season was another thing that a head coach could recognize. It's not just up to Luke Getsy to understand those critical down, short yardage moments that are the make or break of games, would be the difference in them winning the Denver game and not winning the Denver game. You know, and maybe putting your team in a different light and position than they are in right now. So all the way across the board, they got a D from me. So I like that you downgraded him from a C- to a D+, because I think a C- is a little high for him.
Yeah.
So let's scoot through. We'll go to let's go to Luke Getsy next, since we're talking about the coaches. Where's your grade for him?
A D. Yeah, I think it's just been too up and down, right? He's called 3 really good games this season, right? You look at the Denver game, the Commanders game, and the Oakland game. I thought he called those games pretty well. He mixed and matched the run, the play action, got Justin Fields on the move with those games, and got Bagent as well. So I thought those were his 3 best games, but other than that, it's been very inconsistent, right? There's no reason, especially when Justin Fields goes through that 2-game stretch, that he's one of the best quarterbacks playing wise, right? Those 2 weeks, and then all of a sudden drop down because of play calling and not being able to realize, hey, this is what worked last week. Why not? Let's do the same thing, right? And then all of a sudden make adjustments of. So I think he doesn't make adjustments, and that's a common theme between him and Eberflus. You know, it is one thing. Sometimes guys play a crappy first half, right? It is what it is. But it's about coming out in that second half, realizing your mistakes, being able to get on the drawing board and correct that in the second half. And I think that's something that he's really struggled to do. And we look at the Denver game. That's a part of the reason why they lost in that, just his play calling a little bit in the second half. They were so hot in that first half. All of a sudden, he took his foot off the pedal. When you're rolling and everything's going, you got to continue that momentum. And I think he got very complacent in that second half. So I think the whole thing, when I look at this year, and this is something that's come up a bunch, I think it is a wasted year, right? Because we had all the weapons that we needed offensively. This was a critical year for the offense and Justin Fields.
Yep.
And this feels like a waste. It really does. It feels like we should have known exactly what we had in Justin Fields. And now it's like, oh, well, we don't really know what we have. We got to reevaluate and all this. And the thing is, I'm not as concerned. Obviously, we want to win games, but just the inconsistency of this offense. This year was all about the offense, right? Obviously, the defense needed to improve, but this year was all about the offense, figuring out exactly what Justin Fields can do, improving. And the thing that scratches my head is after that Oakland game, right? They had such success with Foreman. Then the next week, Bagent's throwing the ball on Sunday Night Football 40-something times, which makes you scratch your head. You're like, you have a really good running back in Foreman. You know, his yards per carry is out of this world, but you're going to put pressure on a young rookie quarterback, undrafted free agent, on a big stage. So it kind of just makes you scratch your head. So I don't know if it's the ego. I don't know if he's like, this is my offense, this is how I'm running it. You got to make adjustments, because at the end of the day, he's not going to be here if he keeps running things this way. Same with Eberflus.
No, I agree. I gave Luke Getsy an F. He's not getting a passing grade from me this year. The tush push is on his watch. We know that for certain. The lack of adjustments, you nailed it. That's the number one thing. I think I saw a stat where Tyson Bagent and Justin Fields QBRs through 3 quarters is fantastic, and then in the 4th quarter it completely bottoms out because the other team has figured it out. When we heard against the Panthers, the last loss they had against the Chargers, I asked Nick Moriano, like, hey, what the Cole Kmet said, like, I said, hey, how come they weren't running the ball as much? And he said, well, it was a look we were getting. Oh, no, it was against the Saints. I'm sorry, not the Chargers. Against the Saints. Like, hey, what happened to the run game in the second half? Yep. They were doing well and seemed to fall off. And some people were making the observation that they were only running to the left side. They weren't running behind Darnell Wright. And then Cole Kmet kind of gave this revealing thing that the Saints defense adjusted and was giving them a different look, and that the Bears didn't adjust back. Well, that's Luke Getsy, ladies and gentlemen, and that's been kind of on display all year long. I have a big issue with the way they coach these guys up entering the year to not be ready. Chase Claypool and his lack of execution week 1 against the Packers, and then you come to the podium and say, well, if we had the execution on the outside, well, you needed to have your players ready too. And that's the other part. Like, I talk a lot about what's going on the field, but I pay attention to what they're saying and the accountability they hold, at the press conferences. And you can take your stock in the pressers or not, but I just think, again, it's about leadership. And how many times have I heard Luke Getsy go to the podium and say, I need to do better? Not much, if any. And I know he's never said it first. It's always the players have to do better. The players have to execute what he's trying to do. It's never what he needs to do better. And, at least first out his mouth. Then you also talk about the fact that Justin Fields had to be the one to kind of put a stop to everything and say, hey, this isn't working for me. This is too much information, too much data. I want to do things my way. This isn't working. We got to change things up. Luke Getsy should have been the one to say that before Justin ever had to be the bad guy and get in front of the media. And Luke Getsy didn't have enough leadership and fortitude to, put his pride to the side and understand what was right in front of him. And that's that nothing was working. And you wait till your quarterback has to be the one to look like the bad guy and call out the obvious.
And what happened after he called him out? His two best games.
Right.
Play calling was great. So I think it worked. So that's the biggest thing. And we're going to get to Justin Fields in a second. But I think that's the biggest thing that really bothers me is it took that for a player to be so disgruntled that he was like, listen, I don't know. It's the coaching. Like to really put it on them. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if that shifted something in Getsy, because those next two games, he called great games with the exception of that fourth quarter in the Denver game. But it's kind of like, where was this? And we saw the same thing last year, Braggs, right? The first 4 games of the season, 5 games of the season, they struggled. Justin Fields his stats were terrible. And then all of a sudden he turned it on.
Took all the way until the Patriots game before they adjusted.
And then he's playing great, using his feet. He's completing passes. So my thing is like this: you understood last year what he did well, right? Obviously, it wasn't sustainable to run like he did last year, but getting him on the move, working some of those play actions, working some of those boots, the sprint outs, working the play action, working the run game. That's something that really worked. So I'm really just confused about that. And it's unfortunate. And I don't think he's going to be here at the end of the year.
Yeah. I think
as far as Luke Getsy,
No, I agree with that. And to kind of hammer down the point with Luke, there were times in the Tampa game where I thought they let go of the rope of running the ball. I think they only ran the ball 12 times, and 3 of those were jet sweeps, or quarterback runs. Not jet sweeps. That kind of was reminiscent of the Nagy era, giving up on
receiver screens,
right. Giving up on the run before you have to, lack of adjustments, not playing to your quarterback's strengths, both quarterbacks at times, not playing to their strengths. When you talk about the Chargers game with Bagent, although I think the score of that game kind of dictated how they had to go off the reservation. But then also, you can sit here and say, and I know Ravi in our chat, and I love Ravi. He's always been loyal to our shows, and we appreciate his support. He's not a big Fields guy. And he'll say, well, he can't operate an offense. He can't do this. And that's what's holding Luke Getsy's offense back. I'm sure there's a part of Luke that feels that way. Like, everybody says, well, if we had more consistent coaching, we'd have more consistent quarterback play. And I'm sure the coach is like, well, if I had more consistent quarterback play, my offense would look more consistent. Maybe. I'm sure everybody's got, an ego, and I'm sure he doesn't think it's all his fault either. But at the end of the day, the thing that also disturbs me about Luke Getsy is it's clear he only understands one way to run an offense. And I just have a problem with that. That's what we went through with Matt Nagy. You can be a great offensive mind to the one system you understand. But to me, to be a great play caller, a great head coach in this league as an offensive guy, you got to understand a lot more than just what you want to do. It's not a square peg round. You can't fit a square peg into a round hole with your personnel. You have to be able to identify who your talent is and play to your team's strengths. And I just think Luke Getsy has failed miserably at that. And so he gets a failing grade from me.
Look at what Kevin O'Connell has done. Josh Dobbs comes in there, right? Doesn't know the playbook, doesn't even know the guys he's playing with, and back-to-back weeks of having 100+ QB rating.
Yep.
Because he's putting them in a position to succeed. And that's the key, because everyone could say Justin Fields isn't this or that. It doesn't matter what quarterback would be in this Bears system. They would struggle right now because it's the play caller. And I think that's evident. It really is.
Yeah.
And I agree with Jailbreak. It was a stretch because I think sometimes it gets so skewed with who's really calling the plays and everything. Aaron Rodgers had a lot of influence with that offense, right? Just like Matt LaFleur as well. So it's kind of hard to go with like these guys, Nathaniel Hackett and all these guys.
And it was a stretch as far as knowing whether or not he could be a good play caller, because he was a quarterbacks coach for one of the best quarterbacks of all time, but also a terrible hire because they needed to bring in somebody that had a history of developing a quarterback, because Justin Fields' development wasn't finished, and it still isn't finished 3 years into his career. And to not hire someone, I mean, I wanted them to hire an offensive coach. You see how Mike McDaniel is flourishing down in Miami. Now that would have been a really hybrid hire, but it's working out. And, you know, that's great for Miami, not great for us. Brian Dable is looking like he's going to get fired from New York. And a lot of Bears fans would have loved to have him here. And he had a resume of developing Josh Allen. He had that on his resume. But to not even consider guys that, like, when was what part of Luke Getsy's resume was a part of Aaron Rodgers' development? I don't think he was there that far back. So no. I just, you know, I think that was the worst part of the hire, is A, not knowing if he could call plays, but B, more importantly, he had no history of actually developing a quarterback, and they needed that here for Justin Fields. I see Trip Hop. Sorry, I just wanted to add this. Trip Hop says Getsy literally made a system around Fields running last year. Again, it's just like this year. To me, you don't get credit, Luke Getsy, for taking 5 weeks to identify something and adjusting to it. That's too little, too late. Yep. And he did adjust in the Patriots game, and they changed the way he plays, and he adds onto it. It was successful for a while, but isn't sustainable if you can't throw. It's more or less not sustainable because you put your quarterback in risk of getting injured. Justin Fields was throwing the ball for touchdowns during that run when they adjusted. And I understand that a lot of that had to do with, the threat of the run that they were showing. But at the same time, again, just like this year with my issue with the adjustments, it's not that they're not eventually doing them. It's how long it's taking to get to these adjustments. That's where I don't like it. So did you have anything to add on, Corey?
No, I'm good.
Let's get to Justin Fields then. Like I said, we can rush through these, or we can just take our time with each one and see which ones we knock out. So now Justin Fields, let's give our grade for Justin Fields.
Yeah, I'm gonna say a C. Very, very average. To be honest, he had two good games. And I don't think it's all his fault. Like, I think a lot of it's the play calling. Just like if we critique Bajan or whatever quarterback, if it was a different quarterback in there, I think they would struggle because of the play calling. So very average, right? I think it's tough to really evaluate him because of that play calling. But it's something you have to do, right? You have to evaluate with the circumstance you've been given. And he's been up and down, right? He had 2 really good games. Tampa game was okay. Green Bay game wasn't so hot. And then what was the game after the Commanders? What game was that? Minnesota. Minnesota, that was a tough one, because my thing is like this. When we talk about adjustments, you knew before the game happened, right? Everybody and their mother was breaking it down. Baldy's breakdowns. Everybody that watched the Minnesota Vikings knew they're bringing the house on 80% of the plays. And my thing is like this. Even when Justin Fields was out there and Bagent, you have a critical drive where you're trying to score to tie up the game or win the game, and they bring the house on him, and literally he holds the ball too long. His arm gets hit. It turns into a pick. Why not a screen in that situation when you know they're bringing the house, right? In that formation, that's what they've been doing all game. So that's the thing that it's hard to evaluate. Obviously, Justin Fields has to get better in certain areas. But what I saw from him in those 2 games, I really like what I saw. When there was actually great play calling, he played very well, right? The thing is, he still has to develop and grow, and as a quarterback, the talent is there. And I know some people don't want to deal with him. They're done in Chicago. but I think there's so much talent there. He hasn't been given a fair shake this year, and Bajan as well. So I think you need another year with him to figure out really what it is, especially with a new offensive coordinator, because I highly doubt, I would be very surprised if they keep Luke Getsy. But I'm a big Justin Fields fan. I think there's a lot of other teams that would love to have him, the talent and the potential, but it's all about getting the best out of him. So maybe it's a situation where if it doesn't work out with the Bears, he goes somewhere else. He gets in a good system where a quarterback's able to develop. You look at Mike McDaniel with Tua. You know, imagine if Mike McDaniel was here. Like, that would be one of the best situations right now, because look what he's done for Tua. They were ready to throw him to the side. He can't play, all this. Obviously, they have Tyreek Hill.
Yeah, that helped.
Yeah, but I'm saying even besides that, like Mike McDaniel knows how to call plays. He's an offensive mastermind, right? And I think people were realizing, you know, especially like Kyle Shanahan, you know, when he left, he was having some trouble getting the plays going early on that first year without Mike McDaniel. So I think people were realizing how much Mike McDaniel had an influence in San Francisco. So it's that's what the Bears need. They need an offensive guru, a guy that has a proven track record that can develop quarterbacks, like you said, and then eventually. But I think you got to give Justin Fields one more year. I know people are saying Caleb Williams, this, that, and the other. You got to give Justin Fields one more year. You got to give him one more year with a good play caller to see what he can be, because we've seen it in glimpses. We just need to see the full picture together. And I think, yeah, for me, it's been very average.
Well, and I think he would have been guaranteed that fourth year, if not for this Carolina pick potentially being 1 or 2. It is going to present an interesting discussion as we get to the end of the year. And we could have spent all night tonight talking about what we saw from Caleb Williams and Drake May on Saturday, because I was watching both those games with a pretty sharp eye, and I have been for a few weeks now, and they both showed a lot of things in those games, especially Drake May against Duke. That was a really impressive game. But we'll save those conversations as we get more down the road. I'm going to give my grade here for Justin Fields. To me, and this, I'm giving him a D+. I'm giving a little higher than Matt Eberflus. I'm not giving him a C because that's a little too even for me, even scaled. I have a high standard for Justin Fields, and I understand the problems that he has around him that he's had to overcome when it comes to Nagy being his first play caller, Luke Getsy being his second play caller. You know, he got dealt a shitty hand, but that doesn't excuse, you know, his limitations, his flaws as a quarterback. And when you watch those first few weeks and you see guys like DJ Moore clapping on the screen, you know, hey, I'm wide open, and he's not seeing him, it definitely felt like everything. He was overwhelmed. He even admitted that when he came in week 3. He's having trouble with zone coverage. You know, the game he had of his life against Washington, they asked Matt Eberflus, Nick Moriano asked Matt Eberflus during the week, like, well, what did you see that they changed in that Washington game? And he said, well, they didn't change anything. They just kept running cover 1. So obviously he's comfortable throwing it, you know, to against the cover 1, but he's got to be able to recognize other defenses and have the confidence to grip it and rip it against other coverages that he's seeing. He's 3 years in this league. Now he's done great, you know, identifying things pre-snap. You know, you're seeing the can stuff that, you know, some of these guys that break down quarterback evaluation have put that on display. And so that's an improvement, but then everything seems to just get sped up once the ball is hiked. And yes, I understand the center ain't hiking the ball correctly. It's throwing off the timing, and Chase Claypool isn't blocking out on the outside to start the year. That's not helping. And there's a lot of different variables that go into running a smooth and consistent offense, and he hasn't got that at times. But at the end of the day, not everything's always going to be operated perfectly, and it just hasn't been there. Now, the other reason I'm giving him a D+ is because he's still taking unnecessary sacks. Last year, I heard a lot of fans come at me and say, you know, Greg, it's not the offensive line that's the reason he's taking all these sacks. It's his fault. And I refuse to believe that. I honestly refuse to even consider it because of how bad their offensive line was. I would consistently see guys like Sam Mustipher getting blown up, And, you had a rookie left tackle and you had no right tackle. And I was like, how is he supposed to, operate behind this line of scrimmage when there is none? Well, this year they have a better offensive line. Their offensive line's played pretty well this year. And he still is taking unnecessary sacks. And one of them, what led to him getting injured, which is the other reason why he's teetering towards a failing grade for me, because while it's unfortunate he got hurt, it could have been preventable if he just got the ball out of his hands, whether it's to throw to an open receiver or throw the damn ball out of bounds. And instead, tick, 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 tick. 11 seconds, I think, is what they clocked it at when he eventually got sacked and hurt his thumb. And now he's out, which hurts his own development, which hurts his chance of proving to Ryan Poles, hey, I'm your guy. You can trust me. It only adds fuel to the fire that he can't be trusted. So now you have 7 games to return. You have a hurt thumb. You've been off a month. These could have been avoided because of you, Justin, that you can't blame that specifically on Luke Getsy. So it sucks. It's bad luck somewhat. I mean, I remember when Jake Cutler hurt his thumb, the Bears were rolling that year. We were talking about that. Luck comes into play, but that sack could have been avoidable. And it kind of put on display the overall problem with sacks being a negative play. You can't take negative plays, can't take sacks just for the operation of your offense, but also for yourself, for your long-term health as the quarterback, and us trying to make a decision here, us being the Bears and, us as fans trying to, understand what's going on here. It only clouds that vision even more. So, last year I had friends giving me shit because we did some grades after the season. I said I would give him an A because I was so in the bag for Justin, and I felt like he had no help around him. He literally carried this team on his back. He set NFL records, and I was willing to give him the benefit of the doubt across the board. But this year, I understand some of the limitations, and it's not, it hasn't been a great situation, but at the same time, he has to hold accountability for the things that he can or can't do. The other thing I'll say, because I talk a lot about what's said in the press conferences and stuff, and I'll speak to this. While I think Justin had to do what he had to do when he came to the podium, I didn't think like that's the right way of going about it. You can't go to the podium and call your coaches out. And I think he got to a point where he'd had enough, and maybe those things were said behind closed doors so many times that they weren't being heard. So he's like, I'm going to put it on Front Street for everyone to hear, media and fans included. And then a change was made, but I just didn't think that that was a great thing for him personally. If I was his agent, I would have told him to not do that. And then to come back after practice and then correct what he said and then apologize for it was even worse than what he said initially. If you want to be honest, but then backtracking, and I don't know who gave him that advice to do that. That didn't look good either. And so I just think at this point, some of that stuff is all marks that I'm looking at. On the field's more important than off the field, but I'm looking at the totality of everything. So we got 7 games to go, and I'm hoping that, we see more of what we saw in the Denver and Washington game, but I just think there's a high mountain to climb when you consider all the variables and tough teams on the slate and rust factor being involved. So that's my long-winded spiel, but that's my grade for Justin Fields. And at the end of the day, I think that's going to be part of the reason, why that, like I said, I have a high standard for Justin Fields, and it doesn't mean that I'm not rooting for him or I don't like him, but I got to be fair to my grade, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it or baby him. And I'm sure if you asked him what his grade is on the season, he's not going to give himself a high mark because he has a high standard for himself. I know there's a lot of people in the fan base that want to make excuses for the kid, and he's not a kid. He's a grown ass man. So I'll take the kid part back. He's a kid by my standard because I'm 40 years old, but he's not a kid. He's a grown ass man. So I'm not going to make excuses for him, and I don't think he would either. So go ahead, Corey, if you want to have.
No, I agree with that. I think that's the biggest thing he does is hold the ball. And I think The thing is, what he started to do last year towards the end of the season when he got in a rhythm, he would tuck it and go, or he'd scramble to the side and throw it out of bounds. And I think at times this year, I don't know if it was like he was trying to prove, hey, I can be this pocket passer and I could do this. And my thing is like this. Yes, he has a cannon of an arm. He can make a lot of these throws, but do what you do well, right? There's nothing wrong with getting on the move a little bit more, using your legs when you need to get a first down or scramble. And I feel like at times he was trying to avoid doing that. And that's what made him so hard to defend the previous year. So yes, he ran at crazy levels, in the 2022 season because they had to, right? That was the main. They didn't have a number one receiver, but you got so many weapons now. I wish he would just tuck it and go a lot more because he can really hurt you with his feet, learn how to slide. But I think it was just him trying to say, listen, I've never really ran in my career. Last year was the first time I really was run heavy like that. Now I can pass the ball. So I think he's just holding it too much. And I just think in those two games you saw when the play calling was it gets you so excited because you're like, that's what he's capable of, right? It's a cannon of an arm who was accurate in both of those games. And the one thing, especially in that Washington game, the pass protection was all. I think that was that Tevin's first game back with the Washington game, right? Was that his first?
I think, because
he was on Larry Borum's side,
and
right?
he was on a little bit of a snap count that game.
Exactly, but he was mostly on Larry Borum. He was playing that left. So think about that.
And to your point too, that was one of the other reasons why he didn't get a complete failing grade to me, and I moved him up from a D to a D plus. Is the injuries? Nate Davis, you've had different injuries. Tevin Jenkins was out for the first 4 weeks, and those things have to be
snaps.
And the center has been an absolute disaster this year, and now Braxton Jones has been out, so that definitely gets taken into account as well. But all teams deal with offensive line injuries, but at the same time, I think the Bears have been hit with the injury bug, maybe harder without like exactly going around the league and looking team by team. I think they've been hit by the injury bug a little harder than most.
Yeah, the Commanders game, that was probably the best we've seen the offensive line in a couple of years, pass protection wise. Like think about all the guys they had: Sweat, Chase Young, Jonathan Allen, was it Payne? All those top pass rushers.
Yep.
And they were able to contain them. So it was cool to see like Justin Fields have 5 to 7 seconds on majority of plays, right? Where he could extend plays. And I think Tevin Jenkins makes a huge impact when he's out there. And I know you're iffy about locking him up long term, but I think if he can stay healthy, like he's a force out there. He is a Pro Bowl caliber player. Yep. So I'm hoping he can just finish the season injury-free for the rest of the season, continue to destroy people. He's old school. I love it. And think about him playing alongside Darnell Wright, how much better that has got him. Like every game when he's on his side, he just continues to improve his game. It's always great to have a veteran guy out there. Yep. Like when I played Urlacher and Briggs, telling us what's going on. Same thing with Tevin Jenkins. He's been there. He's done that. He's able to show him tricks of the trade. They're probably working on stuff together. They're going to run this game. I'm going to pass it off to you. Make sure you're quick down in here. So it's always great to have a veteran guy alongside you, especially when you're with, because look what he did for Larry Borum going against Chase Young and Montez Sweat, right? Two of the better pass rushers in the league. And same thing with Wright when he was on him. Like it's fun to see him elevate their game as well.
Yep. And T3P here in the chat, who always keeps me honest, and he knows I love him. He says, can we give Poles and the coaches credit for Tevin Jenkins? And I agree with that. Like we're always harping on these guys, for what they do wrong, but you got to give them their flowers when they do something right. They moved Tevin Jenkins. They said, hey, you're not a tackle, man. They moved him in at guard, and he's flourishing. Yeah. And if he can just stay healthy, yes, I would love him as a long-term option, because that's one less spot you got to worry about in free agency or the draft, and he has experience now. So there's a lot of things and he's nasty. He's a beast. You could argue he's their best offensive lineman, even with Darnell Wright, when he's out there and healthy. So that's the thing that's exciting for when Justin returns here, is that the offensive line certainly seems like it's coming together. The running back room's starting to get healthy again. Deontay Foreman's done a nice job in the absence of Khalil Herbert. Roschon Johnson's come back. I saw a nice clip of him really like putting his head down and pass blocking while Lucas Patrick is getting bowled over. But there's Roschon Johnson, being a brick wall in pass blocking. So that's what's exciting is when Justin comes back, it seems like this offensive line has really hit their stride. And that's something that can help give a fair evaluation of Justin Fields. I'm just worried about the rust factor. I'm worried about who they play coming out the gates. 2 games on the road against the Lions and Vikings. Those are not easy games to shake off the rust. So I'm certainly interested. At the end of the day, hey, it's not fair, but life's not fair. So let's see how Justin responds to some of this stuff. And I'll love nothing more for him to come out and ball out on these teams and have a great end to his year and make this conversation kind of turn for me, because I think everybody can kind of tell from what we've been talking about and what I say on Twitter constantly that I am leaning towards it's time to move on. We got to, aren't going to get many opportunities to pick at 1 and 2. Last year we passed on the quarterbacks and I was completely on board with that. But this year I'm leaning the other way and I don't love that. Would I love nothing more to the run to the podium and draft Marvin Harrison Jr.? Yeah, I've been talking about Marvin Harrison Jr. for 3 years. I'd love for Marvin Harrison Jr. to be on the Bears, but I'm not going to pretend like this isn't a really tough decision for Ryan Poles to make. And if the season ended today, I would be predicting that they'd be moving on from the quarterback, but that doesn't mean that it's written in stone. That doesn't mean that Luke Getsy, Matt Eberflus, and Justin Fields, even though they all get, because from my school, D was a failing grade. They all got failing grades to a large extent, with D's and F's being handed out by me. But that doesn't mean that they can't change the narrative and turn it around these last 7 games. And because I'm predicting something doesn't mean that I'm not rooting for these guys to shut me up and prove me wrong. Well, they'll probably prove me wrong, but I don't think there's no shutting me up, Corey. Before we get into the last, segment of our show, I do want to tell everybody to get on to DraftKings. Use the code CHGO when you sign up. Can you believe we're this deep into the NFL season? 7 games to go for the Bears. We got to make every second count. With DraftKings Sportsbook, you can make the most out of every game day. Bet on your favorite teams for a shot at winning big bucks. New customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 on any matchup. Get in on the action with DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL. Download the app now and use the code CHGO when you sign up. New customers can score $150 instantly in bonus bets for betting just $5 again on the NFL, only on DraftKings Sportsbook with code CHGO. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In West Virginia, visit www.1800gambler.net. Please play responsibly. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, must be 21 or older in most eligible states, but age varies by jurisdiction. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for details and state-specific responsible gambling resources. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms. Use the code CHGO for DraftKings. All right, let's try to do a little rapid fire here to finish. We got about 10 minutes or so before we're going to close up shop here on giving out our grades. And I want to move on to, I want to move on to position groups specifically. Mm-hmm. And so I've kind of given, my synopsis on the team and Matt Eberflus, Justin Fields, and Luke Getsy. So I'm going to leave this segment to you and just kind of rapid fire through some of these. And then we'll kind of let kind of assess it all after it's over. So offensive line, what's your grade for them this season so far, Corey?
I'm going to give them a B minus because I think the past couple of weeks I thought they played pretty well. I think they've improved having Tevin Jenkins back. I think that's been huge for them. I think they've stepped it up. They battled some injuries, him and Braxton Jones being out. Now that they're both back, I I think they definitely improved from last year. And I think that was kind of the weak spot of the team, that and the defensive line.
Yep.
And I think they've greatly improved. They've been awesome in the running game, which we've seen from whatever running back, pick your poison this year with the running backs when they're actually getting the ball, the yards per carry, the big runs, open holes. It's been fun to see Tevin Jenkins pancaking people. Darnell Wright getting better in the run game as well. So it's been a lot of fun to watch. I wish they would just stick with it at times, because the certain games that we didn't perform well, there's a correlation between being very pass heavy and not really relying on the run, especially when you're trying to figure out, whether Bajan's in there or Justin Fields. It just helps whatever quarterback's out there. So I've been impressed how they bounce back, and it's definitely an improvement from last year. So I'm going to give them a B-.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's exciting where they're going. We'll see if Braxton Jones can keep the team from drafting a top 10 left tackle, which I think they'll have that opportunity if they want it, in the offseason. So it'll be exciting to see if Braxton can check that box and let the Bears draft somewhere else. But Ryan Poles has some options on the table, and they have to get center right. My goodness gracious.
And speaking of Braxton Jones, right? Like a lot of people have been hitting me up on Twitter and going back and forth. I like Braxton Jones. My only thing, and I've said this to you, Hogue, Carm, he needs to work on his strength. And I think he has done that. We just need to see more of him, right? Because the previous year, he never got beat around him. He never got beat by inside moves. He just got beat by power, right? Montez Sweat walked him back last year a bunch of times, right? And I said he reminds me a lot of David Bakhtiari. Has the athleticism, just didn't have the strength to anchor for the bowl. And it seems like since he's been back, we've been seeing more improvement in that area, right? So he needs to finish the season strong. It's like we said, if he's the left tackle of the future, that's one less position that you need to fill. So if he can finish the season strong, I think that'll be good, because I think Poles, either way, that's his guy. He wants him to do well, right? He's really high on him. He found a steal in the draft, a guy that was a 2-year starter essentially for them. So if he can work on that anchor and continue to play well the rest of the season, that would be a great thing, because then you could address, like you said, that center position, right? You can address the defensive line. You could address maybe another receiver. So it gives you a lot more flexibility in free agency in the draft. So I'm rooting for him. I like him a lot. Seems like a great dude, a hard worker, right? These next games for a lot of people like him, Justin Fields, some of the other guys on the team, this is their future on the team.
Yep. Got to put out good tape here to end the year. Okay, so let's get on to the next part of the offense. Running back room. What's your grade?
Yeah, I'm going to give him a B, because I think every time they've touched the ball, it's been a positive experience, right? The yards per carry, breaking tackles, always finishing forward. When you need to rely on them, they perform. And Foreman's really come on lately. And think about that. The first couple weeks, he was inactive, right? He's arguably been our best running back this season, right? So you got Khalil Herbert as well, Roschon Johnson. So you got a 3-headed monster, essentially, 3 really good running backs. And I think this is one of the strongest positions on the team. So
has been the last 2 years. They've really played well. Kind of workhorses across the board. So that's their bright spot. Wide receiver room. Where's your grade at?
I'm gonna say it's been a C. Very average, right? Because I'm gonna tell you this: DJ Moore had that great game, but I think just as a whole, we just haven't seen the production that we thought, and that's not on the wide receivers, right? A lot of it's been the QB, a lot of it's been the play calling, but I think for as a whole, what you thought they would produce, I think it's been very average. Do you not agree? Besides that one game, you take that one Washington game away from DJ Moore.
Yep.
And I think for the most part,
I think the names, I think Darnell Mooney and DJ Moore name right, they're great. Obviously we know what they're capable of, but
think about Mooney has underperformed for what we thought he'd be as a number 2 option, right? And that's not all on them. I'm not saying they're not, but a lot of it's been the quarterback and the scheme. So Tyler Scott has come alive a little bit lately, and I think a lot of that is because Bajan has been so used to playing with him in the preseason and working with the twos that you're seeing him get the ball a lot. So, he's an explosive guy, but I think the talent is there. It's just a matter of getting everything together. And like I said, I don't think it's on them. I think it's a combination of the quarterback and the scheme.
Okay. Tight end room led by Cole Kmet, CHGO's very own.
I'm going to say a B, especially how he's played lately. Like really come alive, especially in the red zone. He's been consistent. His hands have been awesome. Something early on in his career that he kind of struggled with a little bit, some of the drops. Really has been a great red zone threat these past couple of weeks. And that's what we saw last year, him come alive as well. So I like him. I like Robert Tonyan. Mercedes Lewis is a great blocker. He's basically an extra offensive lineman out there. I think it's been great in the run game. So what they've been able to do in the run game, we haven't seen Tonyan as much just because they've really been relying on Cole Kmet. We kind of thought we'd see maybe the two-headed monster at tight end. But I really love what Cole Kmet has done. And, you know, I was kind of on the fence, honestly, about his extension just because of – I'm like, yes, you have a lot of other needs to fill. But I think he's filled exactly that position that you need. Like I always said, like I think him performing well is kind of like being like Kyle Rudolph in his prime. A guy that's not a burner, right? And there's nothing against Cole Kmet, but really, really good hands, good blocker, really makes his hay in the red zone. And that same thing, Notre Dame pedigree. So that's what I love what I'm seeing from him.
And they've showed some on tape where he, QB school showing how he's chipping really well in the last game.
Exactly, you know, which helps out. I mean, that's
throwing guys out of the club.
Bro, when I tell you being a defensive end and you see when that tight end is there, oh my God, you got to watch out because I remember 2012 we're playing the Packers. Jermichael Finley, he's spread out. I'm on the right side, and I thought he was too far away from me to chip me. I mean, he depleted me because I didn't see it. I'm all over here. He's here. Boom, ear holes me. I look like an idiot. My coach is getting mad at me. That is a tough block to defend, especially if you don't see it.
Yeah, definitely. And as Shane Marsaw from Tape Never Lies Network, good friend of mine, pointed out, the one thing that was really interesting, he said to me, was that Mark Andrews, when he was a rookie, was 24 years old, and Cole Kmet is 24 right now. And I think that's something we don't realize. And he said another tight end. It wasn't just Mark Andrews, but he was like, Cole's been in the league how many years now? And some of these other guys, you know, they didn't hit their stride until they got older. And Cole's still 24 years old, and he's putting up great numbers. His touchdown production is right up there in the last 2 years with some of the best in the league. So nothing but to be encouraged about what Cole Kmet can do for this team as the wide tight end here moving forward. Maybe pair him with, if you don't need a quarterback and a left tackle with your top two picks, maybe you take a luxury pick with Brock Bowers from Georgia. But we'll just have to wait and see. See, that's what I'm saying. Like, that's when you get to become spoil of the riches, when you don't have to fill needs that you already have on this team. But some of these players gotta show that those aren't needs as we enter the offseason. Let's try to skim through some of these quicker. On the defensive backside, we got the defensive line. What's your grade for those guys?
Yeah, I'm gonna give them a D+. Rush defense, I'm gonna say a B, because I think they perform very well. Rush defense, major improvement, right? Maybe even a B+. I think they're one of the best teams as far as that. But pass rush, it's got to be an F in that regard. So I'm going to say a D+. Just the lack of pressure. And listen, we thought Yannick would come alive. He had a sack in the last game. I think that's the Montez Sweat effect. But you just thought we'd see more pressure from these guys, especially, Walker, you're touting him. And that's what I was worried about, because I was like, most of his sacks in Tennessee were from the inside from a 3 technique. So I kind of worried about that from that production from the end position, because he slotted into that 3 technique in pass rush situations. So, Justin Jones, Billings have played really good in the run game, but we just haven't seen the pass rush. And we didn't expect it from Andrew Billings. To be honest, he's doing exactly what we've needed. He's fulfilled that role. He's been an A in that, right? But the pass rush, Braggs, especially when your secondary is banged up, quarterbacks are having all day over there. They're making a picnic, all that. You can't have that in this league. Even quarterbacks that aren't talented, they'll carve you up if you give them enough time. So that's why I give them a D+. Might be worse, but I'm just trying to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, it's definitely really bad. But Montez is here, so Now we're trending hopefully in the right direction. Linebackers, what's your grade for that group?
I'm going to say a B-, right? They've been banged up a little bit at times, but I think they're one of the better units on the defense for sure. What they've been able to do in the run game, when they brought them in pass rushing situations for blitzes, I think they perform well. Sandlocker, your guy, Edwards. So I think that's really the strength of this team is the linebackers and the secondary, but both of them have kind of battled through some injuries. But I would say a B-. They've been very solid. It's just been tough. It's hard to be very consistent when your defensive line in front of you is not performing at the level it should be in this defense, because this defense, the Chicago too, like Urlacher said, is all about the defensive line. And we just haven't seen that get off, that penetration in opposing backfields. The pass rush is really lacking. So I think we don't see their full potential at linebacker.
Yep, 100%. Secondary, what's your grade on this banged up unit that has some good players on it?
I'm torn between this, a C and a C+, right? I'm leaning more towards a C+, because the circumstance with the lack of pass rush, right, being banged up, having guys come in and out. I thought they've done pretty well with the hand they've been given. It's hard. You're on an island out there, especially playing corner, right, when you have no pressure. So I think there's some talented guys. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with Jalen Johnson going forward. Kyler Gordon has been banged up a bunch, and he had a really good preseason in camp. So we really haven't seen that much with him. Brisker at times, really like him coming downhill, his run support. At times, he gets his eyes in the backfield too much, something we thought we'd see an improvement from last year. So Eddie Jackson, up and down, right? He's been banged up a bunch. He just doesn't seem like he's the same Eddie Jackson. And I know he's getting up there in years and all that, but we're not seeing him put his face in there. Sometimes when I see him come up and make a tackle, he kind of olays people. And you just don't like to see that in this Tampa too. You want to see guys that are going to hit you in the mouth, right? I played with Major Wright, the guy that's always looking for contact. And I know that's not everybody's game, but it's a little bit it gets you a little bit when your safety is coming in on run support and he's kind of olaying running backs in that situation. You got to take a shot at him, and that's what we've seen a lot from Eddie Jackson this season.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not covering somebody put special teams grades. I'm not. You can ask Adam Hogue about special teams. I don't give a shit about that. No, it hasn't. It hasn't been great, but I don't care about special teams. So overall offense, overall defense. Do you want to give a grade on those, and then we'll call it a night?
Overall offense, a D.
Overall, lucky to get
that. Yeah,
the run game's the only thing that gives them an above failing grade.
Yeah, and defense, I'm probably going to say, because the last couple weeks, point wise, they've been decent. So I'm going to say a D+.
Yep.
Right, because I think the last couple weeks, the Commanders game, I think it's in their favor, and I think the defense has gotten better as the season has went on, right? As far as points per game, So yeah, it's just been tough. It's because it's a year that we thought we'd see a lot of improvement, especially on the offensive side. So it's like makes you want to pull your hair out, because this is a waste. This is a waste of a season. I mean, it's not over yet, right? There's always games to play, and there's growth to be made. But it's just unfortunate that they're behind the eight ball in a crucial year for Justin Fields, for this offense, for Luke Getsy and company. And ultimately, there's a lot of decisions that need to be made, especially offensively. And it's very frustrating, because I know how many wins did you predict them to having?
9.
I said 10. I thought there's no way.
Hogue said 10. I said 9.
I said 10 because think about how many games they were in: Philly, Buffalo, Miami, right? Down to the wire. And they had less talent. So I'm like, think about this. You get better talent, better weapons, another year in this scheme. Justin Fields, another year. Luke Getsy, worse. How does that work? But that's why
I get it. And I'm not even asking for too much when it comes to it. Like, I can accept losses against the Chargers and Chiefs, but like,
I can't against the Chargers.
Can't lose to the Packers.
The Chargers have been so up and down. I can't accept that. I can't accept that,
Well,
right?
it's
Because they've been
it's on the road. You got a backup quarterback. You're playing against Justin Herbert. I can at least stomach that. The
but
Packers at home, that was an embarrassment. Week 2 against Tampa, winnable game, embarrassment. Denver, an atrocity where everyone should have been fired. You win those 3 games, right now you have 6 wins on the season. And you're literally not just in the hunt for the playoffs, you'd literally be in the playoff picture.
look at Minnesota. Look at Minnesota. They started out with the same record. They were 1-4, I believe.
Something like that. Yeah.
And look at their winning streak right now.
5
This
in
is
a row.
coaching. It is 100% coaching. Look what they've done with Josh Dobbs. It's been unbelievable. It's just very frustrating because not all coaches are created equal, and everyone just thinks it's on the players. Which yes, the players they're out there, they're making plays, they're not making plays, but people underestimate how important the coaching is, especially for a quarterback that's still developing, right? That hasn't reached his full potential. And it wouldn't matter, if it's CJ Stroud or any of these other guys, they would struggle under a scheme. And it's a shame because they should be a lot better than their record indicates. The offense should be further along. And we just see too much of this, right? And you thought you figured it out last year. You thought you figured it out these 2 games this season where they were one of the best offenses in the NFL, those 2 weeks. It's a waste of a year in a sense. But the good part is there's still games left to play. And listen, I highly doubt they're going to make the playoffs at this point. But I think the one thing that we can see, right, when Justin Fields gets back, if he can continue to develop, if offensively they can continue to work together with some of the receivers, really get the run game going, work on that. And then defensively, hopefully Sweat will continue to improve and get the pressures, and then eventually those turn to sacks. And I'm looking forward to it, right? That even despite everything that's gone wrong, there's still a lot to look forward to, especially with this season, because I think if Justin Fields performs well and this offense does well, then it kind of changes the talk track in Chicago and the media and fans and everything going on. So I think it'd be good to see because I think he's so talented, Braggs, and I'm a big fan of his. Like everyone knows, oh, you're Justin Fields, you're Homer. I'm like, I just think he's so talented, and if they could just get that out of him with the play calling, etc., we've seen what he can do. It's now a matter of him developing and growing. Still a young guy, he's still got room to grow, and I think that's the part. But people aren't patient, and I get it. Like this league is, what have you done for me lately? Yeah. Based on what a lot of people have seen majority of the season, I understand. But those 2 games. When games were actually called well, he was one of the best quarterbacks in the league those 2 weeks.
Yep.
Right. So we see the potential. So I think that's the part that's most frustrating when I'm looking at what the Bears have done.
Yeah, it's about, like you said in that where you talked about this, it's about consistency. Consistency from your quarterback, consistency from your coaches, consistency from this team. Not the highs against Washington, not the lows against Kansas City. Find where you're a competitive team in that middle. That's why last year was way more palatable. They might win more games this year, but it felt like they consistently showed up more week to week last year and played competitive football. Even if it resulted in more losses, it just felt that way as far as the eye test is concerned. So consistency, I think, is the biggest thing for Justin Fields. Stop taking unnecessary sacks. For the coaches, start making your adjustments faster. And, for the defense, keep getting a little better every week. That's been exciting. For the offensive line, keep getting a little better every week. That's exciting. Those are encouraging things happening right now for the Bears, and see where the dust settles when the season's over. So that wraps things up for tonight. What grade would you give me for this show, Corey?
I'd probably give you an F.
You're such a hater. You're
I'm just
You're a hater. How about
I gotta give you an A,
what's
just
my
because
what's my golf grade?
Your golf grade? Oh gosh. Seeing your swing. I don't know how you beat anybody with that swing, man. Oh my gosh. He looks like Charles Barkley over there. You're like Hey, if you didn't have those 301 beers, or 312 beers, I don't know.
301. I don't know where the the 312s. I wasn't drinking. Yeah, I'm more of a whiskey guy. We got to get a whiskey sponsor. But yeah, the 312s, my buddies were flowing deep. We did win the award for drunkest group at the at the golf outing. I'm excited to do another
I saw
one.
your boys, they was feeling no pain.
We were feeling it. We were feeling it, even though it was like 8 a.m. So I'm looking forward to the next golf outing next year. So, all right. Well, that wraps things up for tonight. Thank you to everybody tuning in. Please hit that like button on your way out. Subscribe if you haven't already. But I appreciate everybody tuning in. And thank you, Corey, for your time as always and your knowledge that you give us. And hopefully the Bears can get on a winning streak, win 2 games in a row for the first time in the Matt Eberflus era. How does that sound? That sounds nice. Let's not get greedy here. All right. Well, everybody enjoy Monday Night Football and everything else for the rest of the week. We'll see what the Bears do on Sunday. We'll be back for Bears After Dark next Monday. Until then, bear down.
We all silly like the mayor.